Begin the current Daf Mesech Sotah Daf Lamed Beis. We begin as the seventh parak Elu Nemorin, which the reason why we bring in this parak is because it talks about the parsha of Sotah regarding all the different statements that are said, and we introduce all these other that share the similar characteristic of the parsha of Sotah regarding how you have to say it. Just corresponds with today's daf. Something discussed in today's daf are the things that are elu nemar b'chaloshin, things that have to be said in every language. I mean, that could be said in any language, and regarding things that have to be said specifically in Lashon HaKodesh, which obviously is a whole list, and that gets us into a whole discussion. And one of them is the Parasha of Sotah, which all the things that the Kohen tells her and that she says, all these things regarding that it's said in Lashon HaKodesh. The teaching of Rishon ben Yochai Oimer that he says, a person says Shivcha b'kol namach, when he talks about his praise, he says it with a low voice. And his disgrace, he says out loud as he's going to bring this Agadic teaching. The halacha that a person, if something happens to him, he has to let this know to the public, that people should, daven for him because of the tzara that he's going through. Why did they make that your Shemoneh Esrei should be silent? Not to embarrass those who do sins, because you're confessing your sins. We don't want people to hear what you're saying. The machlekes regarding Krishma, Rebbe says Kiksav, you have to say the way it's written, meaning in Lashon HaKodesh. Chum say b'chaloshin in any language, and the Gemara is going to mean the sources for that machlekes. So we begin the current Daf Lamed Beis, the seventh parak Elu Nemorin, which we bring this in because we speak about the first case is that of our Masechta. Says the Mishnah, Elu Nemorin b'chaloshin, the following things are said in every language. Now, Tais actually says the girsa should not be b'chaloshin. The words actually should be b'lashainam. Which Tais says, what's the difference? The word b'lashainam, it means to say a language that you understand. B'chaloshin would sound like in any language, even if you don't understand it, and that's not true. It's as the two Taisos point this out in different ways. It's specifically b'lashainam, in the language that you understand. But be that as it may, says the Mishnah, what's the list of things that can be said in any language? So number one is that of our Masechta. It's Parsha Sotah. What's Parsha Sotah? So Rashi says, what the Kohen tells her, which is the Shvuah, that we don't say that you have to say it in Lashon HaKodesh the way it's written. No, you could say it in any language. Now, in the Sifri, it's brought, because if you didn't have a pasuk to permit it to be said in any language, as we're going to explain later on, you would have thought to say that you should actually learn that from Yevama, from a Kal V'chomer. If Yevama, which is lesser of a problem, you don't say that all languages are like Lashon HaKodesh, because actually by Chalitza, as we're going to see, that's one of those things that has to be said in Lashon HaKodesh. So Sotah, which is a more Chomer de Ge'isser, isn't it a Kol Shekin that for sure you should have to say it in Lashon HaKodesh? That's why I have to tell you that no, it could be said B'chol Lashon. What's the second thing? Is Vida Meiser. What's Vida Meiser? So we know that there's a 7-year Shemitah cycle. In the third year, the person says the statement, Bi'alti HaKodesh min habayis. I liquidated all the holy things from my house, which is he gets rid of all his meisters and he cleans it out from his house, and he can't hold on to it any longer. So he gives the Meiser Rishon to the Levi, he gives the Meiser Ani to the Aniyim, he takes the Meiser Sheni of the 2 years that passed, and he brings up to Yerushalayim right now, if he didn't bring it up till now, and he confesses. And he says, Bi'alti HaKodesh, what does that refer to, Meiser Sheni? And when he says V'gam Nesatim Levi, that refers to Meiser Rishon. And when he says L'ger L'yasam Amona, that refers to Meiser Ani. And he says it B'chol Lashon, as the Gemara is going to learn later on. And that is, we don't say that it's specifically these words that the pasuk requires him to say in Lashon HaKodesh, like we said in the pasuk. No, the words he says, he could say this parsha B'chol Lashon in whatever language he understands. The next thing that is Kriya Shema. You could say Kriya Shema in any language. V'tfili kedaven in any language. U'brichsamazin, you could do the blessing after the meal, meaning benching in any language. V'shvuas ha'edus, the oath that you say regarding that you don't know testimony of someone could be any language. U'shvuas ha'pikadon, and the oath that you take for a deposit that you're denying that you have, meaning, what does that mean? So Rashi explains for shvuas ha'edus and shvuas ha'pikadon, of course you could swear any language. It means to say, any language that you swore and you denied and you didn't admit, the halacha that you're chayiv a carbon for shvuas eidus and shvuas b'kodin, a carbon oil be yored, is even if you said it in any language, you're going to have the liability of Hasham Gezelis by shvuas b'kodin and the shvuah and the liability by the shvuas eidus. That's a list of things that are nemarim b'chalashin. Now says the Mishnah, the elu nemarim b'lashon HaKodesh. Tais does ask regarding the previous list, why did we skip out certain things like Halal, Kiddush, and Shabbos, Bechaz HaPeres, Bechaz HaMitzvahs. Those are things that also could be said b'chalashin. He says, don't say it because we only pick things that deraisa, because the Gemara and Bracha sounds like Tefillin Kriya Shema is derabanan, and also there it sounds like the Kiddush is deraisa. So Taisa says, I understand Mikra Megillah you didn't say, because Mikra Megillah is something you could say in any language even if you don't understand it. But why didn't you say these other ones? He says, because of the idea he said in the previous Taises, B'chol Lashon means to say even though you don't understand. So those other things that we didn't say, like Halal and Kiddush, those even if you don't understand. Here it's specifically other language that you understand. So that's the list of that could be said B'chol Lashon. Says the Mishnah. Now the following things have to be said specifically in Lashon HaKodesh, and that is we don't say that we should learn that from this whole list we just said before, that even though they're written in the Torah, you could say it in any language that you want to, and you don't have to say in Lashon HaKodesh. No, because by these that we're going to say right now, we find sources that say it's ma'akev, it has to be said exactly in Lashon HaKodesh. What are they? So number one is Mikra Bikurim. The parsha by Bikurim, which is when a person brings his first fruits of the Shibbas Aminim up to the Beis Hamikdash, he would say, Arami Yovid Avi, we know this famous psukim because we darshan it in the Haggadah, all these psukim. So Arami Yovid Avi to the end of the parsha, that has to be said in Lashon HaKodesh. The second item is V'chalitza, the chalitza due to the Yavama, which she says, May in Yavama, he says, my brother-in-law doesn't want to give him to me, and he says, yeah, I don't want to take her. And then after the chalitza, she says, Kocha Yasa Le'ish, this we do to the man. All these words have to be said in Lashon HaKodesh. Brachas to kolalis. What's this referring to? When Yeshua and Klal Yisrael by Har Grizim and Har Evel, when they crossed over the Jordan River, those brachas and kolalis were specifically in Lashon HaKodesh. Birchas Kohanim, which is Nesias Kapayim, which is the duchening, that has to be Yeberecha Hashem Yishmerecha. Those words have to be said in Lashon HaKodesh. Uvirchas Kohen Gadol, which on Yom Kippurim, after he did the Avodah, this week's parsha Lefnai V'Lefnim, so then he would go ahead and say in the Torah the parsha, and he would make 8 brachas, as the Mishnah explains later on, the Memam Beis. That bracha had to be in Lashon HaKodesh. Uparshas HaMelech, which at the end of the parak where they explain, it refers to the parsha of Hakil. This year, certain Chassidim very into Hakil, right? The Kohen Gadol, the Melech would have the parsha that he would say, that was in Devarim Mishnah Torah, so that would be specifically in Lashon HaKodesh. Uparshas Egla Rufa, and when they find a dead person, they would decapitate a calf. So they would say, Yodeinu l'shafchu, our hands didn't spill this blood. Kapel Amchi Yisrael, atone for your people, the Jewish people, etc. That had to be specifically in Lashon HaKodesh. Umeshuach Mulchama, the anointed kohen for specific war, b'shosh medabalam, when we speak to the people, that also had to be Lashon HaKodesh, as the pasuk says in Devarim Perichov. He would tell them, inspire them, motivate them, get up and say, don't be afraid. The words had to be specifically in Lashon HaKodesh. Now the Mishnah explains them, the sources of these that we said on the Lashon HaKodesh, one by one. It says the Mishnah, Mikri B'Rikurim Keitzat. What does it mean, Keitzat? So Rashi explains, we really mean to say Minayin. Where do we know that the Parashat B'Kurim has to be said in Lashon HaKodesh? Because it says in the pasuk, that you're going to respond and you're going to say in front of Hashem, your God. Now, so it says the word Vanisa. And it says over there by the Berachas and the clause of Hagrizim, it says the Levim responded and they said. So it says Anu and Amru, and it says Vanisa Vamarta. So we make a Gezer Shav, we make a Hekesh. Just like over the year, wasn't Lashon HaKodesh, which Rashi says later on, we're going to explain how do we know that by Har Grizim wasn't Lashon HaKodesh, but we know that. So just like over there was Lashon HaKodesh, Avkam Lashon HaKodesh here also it says an Amira was also Lashon HaKodesh. Okay, that's item number 1. Item number 2, Chalitza Ketza. How do you know that Chalitza, those words, the parasha had to be Lashon HaKodesh? Because it says in the bottom, it says, she's going to respond and she's going to say, it says over there, by Hagrizim Amru, Levim responded and they said, so it says again, Aniya and Amira. Like over there was Lashon HaKodesh. Over here, by Chalitza, it has to be exactly in the Lashon HaKodesh. Yehuda says, no, you don't need to learn this idea of Chalitza from Gzeira Shava because you can know it from the context of Chalitza itself. What says? Yeah, says because it says V'ansa v'amra kacha. She's going to respond and she's going to say like this. Like this sounds like this wording that's said over here. Until she says in this wording, so you see specifically from there itself that you know it. You don't have to come on to any Gzeira Shava. You know it exactly from the words of the pasuk itself. Now, Berachas of Klal Ketzad says the Mishnah, how do you know which that was the source, according to the comment, for both of them, or at least for one of them? How do you know by Har Grizim the brachas and the clause that they said were in Lashon HaKodesh? Because so now the Mishnah actually just gets in a lengthy discussion, which we're going to explain more in the Gemara. Once the Jews passed over the Jordan River, they came to these two mountains. So he says they weren't really mountains. They came to Har Grizim and Har Evel, Shemron, which was near the Shemron. Shebetzat Shechem, on the side of Shechem, Shebeitzel Elonim Moire, near Elonim Moire. Shemak says, "Pas in Devarim." Says, "Haloihema be'eva yarden v'gayma." Behold, that they are on the other side of the Jordan, near Elonim Moire. Well, how know it says within Bereshis v'yav Avram bar. Avram passed by in the land on Mokam Shechem until the place of Shechem at Elonim Moire. So ma Elon Moire or Melahal Shechem, just like over the Elon Moire is Shechem. Af Elon Moire Hamakan is Shechem. It's Shechem. Okay. So Shisha Shvatim Al Resh Har Grizim. You had 6 tribes that went up to Har Grizim. The Shisha Shvatim Al Resh Har Hevel. You had the other 6 that went up to the other mountain of Har Hevel. Vakanim Belavim Ba'aron. Kam Levim the Aron. Oimdim Lamata Be'emtza. They were standing down on the bottom in the middle between the two mountains. Hakahanim Akivin is Aron. So you had the Kam surrounding the Aron. Belavim as a Kam. Levim was surrounding the Kahanim. B'chol Yisrael Mekan Mekan. And you have all the Jewish people on either sides on the mountains. Shlomek says a pasuk in Yeshua. Chol Yisrael Bezakeinu, all the Jewish people and its elders, and the Ger says V'shoitrim, the officers, V'shoiftav, and the judges, they were standing either side La'aron, from the Aron, V'gayim, etc. So Havchu, they, the Levium, turned Peneim, their faces, Klapi Har Grizim. So the first they turned their face to Mount Grizim, Upaskel B'bracha, they opened up in the Bracha, meaning all the curses that they said were first said in the terminology of a blessing. Blessed is the man that doesn't make an image, a molten image, ve'elu, and either one, meaning the ones on Har Grizim and the ones on Har Evel. Amen. They answered Amen. He says Rashi, it says ve'elu yamdu levarich, that these stood up to bless. Says Rashi, not that the Shvatim would bless or curse. The Levium that stood between the two mountains, they would turn their face to Har Grizim with a bracha and to Har Evel with a klala, but it's not like the people on the mountains would give the blessings or give the curses. Then they turn their face to Har Evel. They open up with a curse, as it says in Devarim. The bracha doesn't say, the curse says, but our Mishnah is telling us they would first give the blessing and then the curse. Cursed is the man that makes a form, an image. And both would answer Amen. Until they finish all the blessings and all the curses.
Interesting thing is, this is this is the one thing that's not repeated ever. Like the Mishnah has things, Chalitza, Mazan, Kriyashma. This is different. This is what was. Well, what do we have to know? What Lashna was said in?
Right, I mean for the brachas and klalas.
Yeah.
Right. Well, chalitza is still negeya. All these different things are negeya. These are brachas and mazon. These things have halachic relevancy. The question is regarding brachas and klalas. You could say that brachas and klalas have relevancy because we learn other things from brachas and klalas. How we know that it's b'lashon hakodesh, b'nisa v'marta. Meaning, how do we know that chalitza is with is b'lashon hakodesh? Because we know it from what was there by the klalas and the brachas. So that would be important for that. But sometimes they do ask the question: why do we have to know? What's the lashon again? It says, why do we have to know what happened then? Then continues the Mishnah. Then they brought the stones. They built an altar. And they cemented it. And because of love, it's called Divrei Torah. And they wrote all the words of the Torah, as the pasuk says, "Of you're going to build a mezbech over there. Because it's called Divrei Torah, as always bear hated." So they wrote all the Torah, B'Shim Lashon, in 70 languages, on that Mezbeach. Shneimach says in the pasuk with a bad hate of explaining it very well. Then they demolished the Mezbeach after they had sacrificed oils and shlam in it, like it says, V'alisa alav oilos. But not less of them, they took the stones, of they came as the Tintam Beis, V'lanu b'mekayman. And then they slept in their place, meaning as Rashi says, wherever they were staying, in Gilgal, in their place of lodging, and that's where they erected the stones. So that's how the Mishnah concludes regarding the narrative of Har Grizim and Har Evel, of that case. What was the brachas haklalas? Explained that what the brachas haklalas were. Now the Mishnah had opened up by saying, Parsha Sotah. The first thing that we said is Namad and B'Chaloshin was the Parsha of Sotah. So our Mishnah brought the source for those that are said b'lashon hakodesh. But Parsha Shad Minolan, how do we know that it said b'chol lashon, whatever language you want to say? Says the Gemara, the Chsiv, it says a pasuk in Bamidbar. It says v'amar hakohen leisha. The kohen will tell to the woman. So actually, two different gersayos. Our Gemara makes it sound like v'amar hakohen leisha b'chol lashon she'omer. Any language that he says, it's on the word amar. Rashi brings a different gersa. V'amar el ha'isha, to the woman means b'chol lashon shishamas. Any language that she hears. So he says not to have the gersa of amar kohen leisha. It's el ha'isha. It sounds like the words that will come into her heart that she'll recognize the language. It depends on her understanding the language. So it's on the woman, not the kohen. Be that as it may, that's the source of nemanas b'chol lashon. Talmud within the brayso, mashminas b'chol lashon shishamas. That, like we just said in the Mishnah, that we let her know these words in any language that she'll understand. Now, what are we letting her know? What are these things that we're telling it to her b'chol lashon? As Taisa said, especially b'lashaynah, meaning language that they'll understand. So we tell her a few things. We tell her amahi shaisa. For what is she drinking? As the Gemara is going to explain, that we tell her it's the pretense that caused you that you're going to drink this. And with what she drinks, meaning it's a repulsive, repugnant vessel, which is an earthenware vessel, we tell her that it's going to be in that. Ama nitmas, regarding what is it that brought her to a state of tumah, because she has this lightheadedness and this laughter. And the reason is because we want to rebuke the women that they should not do the same type of conduct, hanging out with these types of people and just laughing and doing these things, because that brings to this bloating of the stomach. Uvemahi nitmas. And with what did she become tamei? Meaning we let her know the halachas of the mayim amorim, these cursed waters, for what type of a tumah will it check her? Meaning if she became tamei deliberately and willingly, then it's going to check her. But if she did it by mistake, for example, they told her your husband died or she was raped, it's not going to check her. So like the Gemara explains, Amahi Shaisa, regarding what we say for what is she drinking, it means at least because the husband warned her, because she was secluded. Uvemahi Shaisa, and we tell her in any language what she's going to drink is b'mekidesh al-ches, in this earthenware vessel. Amanit mas, for what did she become tamei, meaning what made her tamei, aliskes chayk v'yaldis, what cause it was because she had all this laughter and acting childish. Uvemahi nitmas, and with what did she actually become tamei? Well, it depends. If we tell her if it's b'shogeg or b'mezid, it depends if she did it by mistake or deliberately. And ba'onis abadas, no, she did it willingly or she was coerced. Says the Gemara, b'kol kach lama. Why do we have to let her know this last point of the halachas of the water? In other words, the first ones we understand because of a nebasar kol hanashim. We want all the women to be rebuked and say, yeah, we're degrading her because she went and she was hanging out in the chats and this and that, and that's why, because she was laughing with the men, and that's what we understand. But what's the point of this last one? Because we don't want to spread rumors on these bitter waters, because if she became tamei because a man raped her, because she did a mistake, and it's not going to check her out, she shouldn't think, had I done it deliberately, also wouldn't have checked me out. I know I had relations with another man and nothing happened to me. No. You should know the halacha. This didn't do because it wasn't that. If it would have been that, it would check it out. So because of the laws, that's why we let her know that last point also. Next item we mentioned in the Mishnah was Vida Maisa. We said that the confession of the Maisa in the third year of the Shemitah cycle, when you're liquidating all the Maisers that you have in the house, those statements could be said in any language. Says the Gemara Banal, where do we know that from? Because the Chsiv says a passing in the bottom. It says, you're going to say in front of Hashem, your God, I liquidated, I got rid of all the kodesh from my house, all the holy things. My Sarishan, my Sasheni, my Sa'ani, I got rid of all of it. Now, we learn out, when it says Vamarta, you learn out the word V'omar hakoyin leisha from Sotah, which is b'chalash and shoayim, like we said before. It's in any language that is said. Same thing over here is in any language. However, the Gemara asks, it says, why don't you learn out the saying from Levim? There it also says the word of Amira. Malam lashon kodesh, like what we said was in lashon kodesh. Abkam lashon kodesh. Also should be lashon kodesh. Says the Gemara, no. Dan amira grei dasa. We learn out. We're here. It only says the word Amira. It says Vamarta. From over there by Sotah, which also says only the word Va'amar. We're not going to learn out where here it says only the word Amar by Vida Meiser from the Levim, which has another terminology of Anisa. That extra terminology changes the variable, and therefore we'd rather learn that from Sotah, which has just the word Amira, than that of the Levim, which would require also Lashon Kodesh. Now, related discussion. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa and the Gadic teaching. Shimon Yochai Omer, he says, Odom Omer Shivcha B'Kol Namach. A person says his own praise in a low voice, Ugenusa B'Kol Ram, but his disgrace in a loud voice. Where do you see this? Shivcha B'Kol Namach, his praise in a low voice, meaning from the fact that it didn't say Aniya, the word V'Anisa sounds like an amplification. But it doesn't say Aniya min Vidu Meister. By Vidu Meister, when you're confessing that, you're saying I did what I had to. I got rid of all the Meisters, which, what do we say over there? Lo yavarti mi mitzvaysecha. I didn't violate your mitzvahs, v'lo yishachachta, I didn't forget. So he's praising himself. So that's said in a low voice. Genusa b'kol ram, but his disgrace, he says in a loud voice, is mimikre bikurim. By bikurim, you say Arami Ered Avi, that's his disgrace, because he's admitting that his father, the wicked Lavan Arami, was a Rasha, that's his Zayda. So Mezuk the Yichis, he says, this is given the Zayda, that you say out loud. Because you see, Bon Nisa B'Marta. So you see that when you're talking about Yishach, you say, "Lo, I'm getting the mitzvahs." But when you talk about Yegunus, you say it out loud. Says the Gemara, really? Begunus B'Kol Ram? Really, your disgrace? You're supposed to say out loud? He says, why did they institute that a person should say his tefillah? Tefillah balachash. He should whisper his tefillah, like we find by Chana, the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, that Eli wasn't able to hear what she was saying. She was whispering because she's davening. When you daven low, not that the other person should hear you. Why? Because they should not to embarrass those who committed sins, who are confessing in their tefillahs for the averos that they did. And I'll prove it to you, says the Shimon Yochai. Because the pasuk doesn't differentiate mokum and chatas la'oila. When you're going to bring a karban chatas, there's not a set place to slaughter the karban chatas. Why? That we don't want people to understand that you bring a chatas, that you'll be embarrassed. Whoever brings an oila, any country custom, all in the soften. Because if we wanted to embarrass someone who committed a sin, we would say, okay, chaytim, you go to that area. No, we don't do that. So how could you say that by your gnus you say it out loud? You see when we daven Jil Balachach, it's supposed to be silent for that reason. So the Gemara, you're right, don't say gnusa. Don't say your disgrace. You're right, it's true. You're not supposed to embarrass yourself out loud. And that's why when you daven, do it still and don't amplify your sins. Rather say your pain. The pain, the tzaras that went through a person, that went over the Jewish people. When we say Arami Ovid Avi by Parsha Bikurim, we're talking about the tzaras we had from the tzaras of Lavan Aram and the tzaras of Mitzrayim. That we say out loud, because that tzar, you say out loud. Why would you do that? Ketan like learn the Brisa. Pasuk the Yikra by the B'Tzeira, it says V'Tomei Tomei Yikra. He calls out Tomei Tomei, meaning go away from me because I'm Tomei. Why is he saying out loud? Because says the Gemara, the Brisa says Tzorch L'Diyat Tzar L'Ram. He has to notify his pain to the public. Some people go through mezchilitin and no one knows anything. And Rabbi, no, people should know. But that people could beseech mercy for him and say Nebuch what he's going through and try to daven for him. And so to v'chomisha by daver, something happens to a person. Yes, let people know. People could beseech mercy for him. So that's exactly what it is. By Adami Ovidavi, we want people to know Atzaris that we went through, that we say out loud. The Gnus know that we say silently, and those Shvach we say silently, that we say when we're confessing, which is really a good thing that we did, we say that low, we don't amplify that out loud. Now, Gufa, we learned, the Gemara is going to expound on this. You said, this teaching that we just said before, we said, why did they go ahead and make that when we daven quietly? We said that we don't want to embarrass someone who committed sin, as we find, the pasuk doesn't differentiate an area, a cordon off for those who do a chatas versus an oila. They're all done in the same area, and you see because we don't want to embarrass the person. Says Gemara, really? We don't embarrass the guy who's bringing a chatas to show as the chayta, but it could dumb him. But there are other signs to recognize that the guy's bringing a chatas and not an oila, because the difference is in the bloods of the carbon. Why? Dam chatas lamalam. When you spray the blood of the chatas, which is the ikr part of the carbon, it's above the red string that divided the height of the mizbeach. Like it says, al karnos, which is the corners on the top. Yet v'dam oila, the blood of the oila doesn't say karnos, and he placed the blood lamata on the bottom of the chotas sikra, and so to all the bloods of all the other karbanos. So this guy's carbon is being sprayed. We're watching him. Ooh, it has getin on the vaida.
It's so not visible. That's much less visible than the shchita on the chatas.
Yeah, okay, but I'm saying, but even so, why would it be so much visible? Shchita versus everyone's there. Whoever's there is watching, and they're saying next, and they say his carbon's going. Oh, what's the thing? Yeah, what's bring that carbon? You know, this crazy. Yeah. It's like everyone's looking. We got the blit. You know. Yeah. Okay, so I'm saying, so the Gemara says Hasim no over there, Kayin. Only the Kayin who the other he knows. You have to know why no one else knows. I guess because the blood, no one knows which animal it's coming from. The Kayin knows which carbon it is. We got to the roof weiß was this guy for. Everyone else doesn't know. Everyone else, and so it's not so embarrassing, right? So, but the shchita guy's coming with his behemoth. He's doing his smich on it, and shchita, and say, oh, why is he going over there? He's in the other line. Oh, okay. So we see we don't embarrass him. Says well, it's not true. We do embarrass him because v'ikachatas nekeva oila zachar. What do you mean? A chatas is a female animal. A oila is a male animal. So everyone knows that who's bringing oila, who's bringing chatas. So v'zaksta, of course, there's a difference. So you can know Hasam over there mechasya, the female genitalia of the animal is covered ba'alya with the tail. It's not recognizable, so you can't tell who's the male and who's the female. Says, wait a second. There's two types of animals that you bring as a chatas, the female animal. Teinach kavsa, that makes sense for the female sheep, which has a tail that covers it. But se'ira, the she-goat, you could show your kids when you go to the farms on Cholamayid, show them the differences so they know the karbanas. Se'ira ma'ikal ameima. But by the she-goat, what are you going to say? It doesn't have a tail. So you can recognize if it's a female. So what are you going to say over there? The person is going to be embarrassed. Says Gemara, yeah, but he's embarrassing himself. He had a choice. If he would be embarrassed, he should have brought the she-lamb. He's bringing a she-goat. This is Sedana Shield. No one asked you to bring that which would be recognizable. He had an ability to be undercover. Because all the chatois of a yachid, if he wants, he can bring a she-lamb. If he wants, he can bring a she-goat. Except for the chatos of Avodah Zarah, which the pasuk in Shlach explicitly says, it's Eiz Bashnasa. Has to be a goat. That's first year. So that's the Gemara's question. The Gemara says, wait a second. Chatas d'avodas kachavim, but chatas of Avodah Zarah, d'loi sagid lav seira. There you can't get out of it. It has to be a she-goat. Michael, what are you going to say over there? They're going to be embarrassed because he can't bring a she-lamb. Says the Gemara, Hasam nichse v'nezel. Let him be embarrassed and disgraced. The pasuk wants him to be embarrassed. Kehechad in the chapale. They should get an atonement for such a big einish. We want them to be like that. Now, what? Yeah, but shoygig for nazvoid the zuda. This is Zach. So Tais actually says. So wait a second. If we want him to be embarrassed, why do we cordon off a separate area for him? Just like you make him bring in A's that he should be embarrassed. We don't give him the option of a kivsa. Why don't you make him a separate area? Avoid the zuda. You go on that line. Why don't you make him a separate area where he does the shchit? This says Tais a very important psychological principle. We already made him embarrassed for one thing. What's this there? Don't overdo it. You already embarrassed him. Don't embarrass him. Even someone who does it with the zara. What do you have to do more than that? It's genig shine. So that's an important principle that Taisus is teaching us. Now the Mishnah continued. It said Kriya Shema is also said b'chalash and can be said in any language. What do you know that? Because the Chsiv says a pasuk in Devarim, the pasuk Shema Yisrael. Hear Klal Yisrael. What does it mean here? What's Yisrael Zalheren? Any language that you hear. Not everyone understands Lashon HaKodesh. So you see, it can be said whatever language he understands. However, the Gemara brings that this is actually machlokes. In the Brisa, Kriya Shema Kiksava. Kriya Shema has to be said the way it's written, meaning Lashon HaKodesh has to be Rebbe's opinion of Rebbe. They say no, Chalashon in any language. Says the Gemara, my time in the Rebbe. What's the reason of Rebbe that he says that it has to be specifically in Lashon HaKodesh? It says Amakra because the says V'hayu. The word V'hayu means B'haviyasin. It should be as it is, which means it is exactly as it is, which is Lashon HaKodesh, not in any other language. But Abanan, what would they tell you? No, Amakra. The pasuk says Shema. Any language that you hear, like we just mentioned before, which is not only Lashon HaKodesh. But the Gemara says, what does each one do with the other one's sources? But it says V'hayu, and you tell me it could be any language. I thought V'hayu means B'haviyasin. Yeah, there's a distant B'haviyasin. B'haviyasin can either mean exactly it is in the words that it says, or it can mean in the order that it is. I'm afraid that's just teaching that it shouldn't be out of order backwards. But that's what Bahayu teaches, not that it has to be Lashon HaKodesh. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, how does he know that you cannot be backwards if he's already using Bahayu to teach Rabbi Yassin? Says Gemara, Nafkele, he learns that midvarim hadvarim, meaning because it says Bahayu hadvarim ha'ela. What's hadvarim at a hay? To teach you from the extra hay that it has to be, these words have to be in the order. But Abanan, dvarim hadvarim, they don't read that the hadvarim is the stylistic way of writing it. The extra hay is not a drasha to make to tell me something else. But then the Gemara says, Rabbi Nami hooks with Shema. What does he do with Shema? The Chacham is saying Shema is Mechol Ater Shemeya. That means even other language. Rabbi holds has to be Lashon HaKodesh. What does he learn from that word Shema? Then he needs to teach you something else. You should hear with your ears what you're saying with your mouth. Meaning, when you say Kri Shema, you should hear it and not whisper it that you don't hear it yourself. But for Rabbanan, they hold like the one who says, if you say Shema and you don't hear it, you're going to be able to it. Which Taisa says, I don't know why you're saying that. Even the Gemara Bracha says that you can learn both things from Shema, but be there as it may, they can hold like that other man, the Amar. Says Gemara, Rebbe will say that Rebbe holds, as you continue to top of Lam Gimel Mid Aleph, for the fact that you need to have a pasuk to tell me that Kri Shema is Kiksava, that it has to be in Lashon HaKodesh. So is that to tell me that Kol HaTorah, but you tell me a drasha to tell me that it has to be Lashon HaKodesh. So is that to say that really Kol Torah throughout the rest of the Torah, B'chaloshin Nemra, which Rashi says that means to say, meaning let's say to read from the Torah in Shul, that would sound like to say that you could read in any language, because these are if you think to say Lashon HaKodesh Nemra, that in general whenever you read from the Torah it has to be Lashon HaKodesh, so then B'hayu Kos Rachman Elamali, why do we need a special drasha by Shema that you tell me that you learn from B'hayu has to be Lashon HaKodesh? What do you mean? Kol Torah Kul has to be Lashon HaKodesh. Why would I need a special limud? Obviously, that it's teaching me that in general, because it can be b'chaloshin. So no, it was necessary to say v'hayu, even though every time you say from the Torah has to be Lashon HaKodesh. Because mishum d'chsev Shema, since it says Shema, I needed v'hayu, because I need to tell you not the darshan like the Chacham do for Kri Shema b'chaloshin shater shemeya. No, it's teaching you lashmi la'aznecha. And v'hayu is teaching us to be in Lashon HaKodesh. And the Gemara says the same thing the other way. Let me accept Rabban. Shall we say Rabban the whole Torah, whole Torah, Lashon HaKodesh Nemra? You always have to say Lashon HaKodesh. Why? These are gedaitik. If you think to say b'chaloshin in any language, Shema d'kaz Rachman Elamali. Why do we need a special limit for Shema that to b'chaloshin if every time in the Torah it's b'chaloshin? So it was necessary. Mishum d'chsev v'hayu. He says v'hayu. And since you would have thought to say v'hayu means to say the way Rebbe says it, that it has to be Lashon HaKodesh, I need to say Shema to tell you no, don't darshan like that. So I can tell you no, all of Torah is like that. But this I need especially to tell you to bavar and not to think to darshan the other way around. And that's what it says, and that's what each one says. You need to have his drasha, but it's not a right to what b'chol haTorah would be. Thank you to any time for hosting us.